Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the September edition of the Webzurich Meetup, well, online Meetup, as we are still not comfortable doing these in person. I know that a few people are already on the stream. Hi, everybody watching out there already. Feel free to go into the chat box next to the video feed and just say hi, say where you're from, because with the virtual meetups, we found that there's like people joining us from all around the world, and it's always exciting to see where people are from. Just, feel free to use the chat to also just chat to other people who are watching the stream and just hang out with us, really. We can't hang out in person, unfortunately, but then again, with this weird weather here in Zurich, at least it's kind of nice that we can stay home and still enjoy some amount of community together, which is super cool. Today we have two fantastic talks lined up for you. I'm super excited about both of them. And we're really, really happy to be continuing our meetups, thanks to the support from our sponsors. And so if you want to talk about this meetup on Twitter, please use the hashtag Webzurich. If you haven't been to Webzurich, or if you don't know what Webzurich is, here is a very short introduction. So Webzurich is a Zurich area meetup for people who make things on the web. That includes, but is not limited to, web developers, designers, user experience experts, accessibility professionals, marketing folks, SEOs, content strategy people, e-commerce experts, folks working on information architecture, extended reality, augmented reality. So pretty much everyone who does something on the web, who makes stuff happen on the web, is very much welcome to be part of our community. So whoever you are, feel free to join us. We do these meetups monthly. And the goal is to kind of just get together, learn from others what they have been up to, hear their stories, inspire each other, get to know what's going on in the tech industry and in the web industry specifically, for which we mostly speak English. It's kind of fine to talk whatever language you want to talk to each other, but you have a better time if you speak English with each other. You don't have to be a native speaker. I'm not a native speaker either. It's perfectly fine. And this is not some magical, like, ethereal being that presents itself to you. You are part of this community if you want to be part of this community. So feel free to let us know if you want to give a talk at this online meetup or in the in-person meetups, if we get back to them, hopefully, eventually. You can talk about pretty much anything. If there's something that you want to change about this meetup, let us know. That sounds interesting potentially as well. We do have a neutral home normally. If we are hosting in-person meetups, that would be the Impact Hub in Zurich. We also have a code of conduct. If you see, hear, or observe anything that is against the code of conduct, please feel free to reach out to us, and we will make sure that it's taken care of and that you feel safe and you are safe with us. When I say our community and Webzurich as a community, we're not just here on YouTube. We also exist on Slack. We are a Slack with multiple channels. We have a Meetup group, so you might have found us through Meetup, depending on where you started your journey today. We also have a website where you can find pretty much all the talks that we have done in the past. You see previous videos, if we have video recordings of the talks, and you see the upcoming events as well. So the Slack and the Meetup group are the most important places to be actually taking part actively. And the Webzurich website is kind of like your gateway into everything. It has all the things and it has an archive of pretty much everything that happened in Webzurich, whereas the Slack is where people actually talk to each other normally. As I said, you can also tweet about us. We are Webzurich on Twitter, but we also use the hashtag Webzurich for the meetups. As I said, this would not be possible without people actually submitting talks, because we are depending on the community as much as the community hopefully can depend on us to run these meetups monthly. Our talks are 15 minutes and have no Q&A, and you can submit your talk through the website. There is a button that says submit your talk. It's a very short form that with a few logistics, and then you're in the pool and you will get a chance to actually make a talk at Webzurich. If you don't know if you're ready to give a talk at Webzurich, reach out to us, reach out to me, reach out to any of the other organizers, use the Slack channels to identify who you can talk to, and basically just propose a topic, and then we can talk about it. We can help you with slides. We can do rehearsals with you. None of that is a problem. If you are interested in potentially trying this speaking at conferences and meetups thing out, then this is a good address to start. We are happy to have you, and we're happy to coach you through the process. When I say we, that is the fantastic Webzurich team, consisting of Alexei, Daniel, Olga, Martin, that is me, Stuart, and Rob. We are doing this in our free time. So this is volunteer work, basically, because we think this community is amazing and we would like to keep it that way. And I started the community originally because there was no such thing anymore in Zurich. There exists precursor events, and I just wanted to bring these kind of events back to Zurich. And now we bring them through the internet, so we bring them to the whole world. Isn't that fantastic? By the way, for those of you who have just joined, feel free to go into the chat and do the same thing as Marianne. Hi, Marianne. I think you were here for the last meetup as well. And just tell us where you're from and what you do, and get to know the other participants in the chat. We do have a bunch of sponsors that are helping us out. If we do in-person events, they are usually sponsoring drinks, snacks, some recording equipment, but we have lots of other ideas about sponsoring. Today's sponsors are Rockstar Recruiting, Graph CMS, and Valtech. Rockstar Recruiting has a little message for you that I will share with you all. So we'll see each other back in a minute, I think, for the actual talks.
Hello, my dear friends of Webzurich. My name is Lucas and I work for Rockstar Recruiting. We are back from Hack Zurich that took part last weekend and are now ready to present you our current hot jobs. We are looking for senior cloud developers, professionally experienced in Java or within the .NET framework, who speak German and are looking for a permanent role in Zurich. If you love working in a team-oriented environment that values the latest technology standards, and if you're up for some spontaneous Nerf gun battles, you might want to consider this one. We're also looking for a software engineer for an international, well-funded startup. If you love building state-of-the-art infrastructure solutions within an open source project using Golang, this one is for you. As always, if you want to know more about these roles, feel free to hit me up on Slack. In case you are looking for a job but none of these two, feel free to get in touch with me as well. So long, thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the talks.
All right. Thanks, Rockstar, for this, and thanks for supporting us throughout the month and years and all this like COVID stuff as well. So, again, if you want to join the conversation and join the community's active side of things between the meetups, then feel free to use webzurich.ch or webzurich.ch as your gateway to all the different things like Slack or our meetup group. Do leave comments on the YouTube videos that we put up. And we also have a live chat after party powered by Jitsi. If you want to join that, go to https://webzh.dev/afterparty after the talks are over. Last but not least, our Halloween edition meetup will be on the 30th of next month. Again, this will be a virtual event, so you can join from wherever you are. Invite your friends. And we are gathering horror stories. So grab some marshmallows, make a little bonfire. No, hold on, everyone's at home. Don't make a little bonfire. You can still eat marshmallows. I ate marshmallows without roasting them over the fire. It's still pretty good. So I guess that's safe to do. With that, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Guillaume, who is bringing us an interesting talk about a tool that I've actually not really, a tool that I've actually not used myself yet. And I read your proposal and I'm like, ooh, that's going to be interesting. So without spoiling it too much, feel free to give a emoji applause in the chat for Guillaume. And Guillaume, have fun. Take us off.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. So one applause for me. Nice to meet you all, guys. I'm very happy to be here and to have the opportunity to talk about probably one of the best tool that you can have for mocking an API or a server, which is Mokun. So it's the one I created. So that's why it's the best on the market. So some forwards before starting the demo about why I created another API mocking tool, because there are already dozens of them. And that's always the first question people ask me. And it's quite simple, because 3 years ago I needed something to mock an API that didn't exist at the moment, which is the most obvious use case for such a tool. And I tried using what was on the market, and you can find a lot of mockapi.com.io, everything, and they are really, really good. They are really good tools out there. Also commercial things like Stoplight or Postman, which offers also a mocking feature. But I don't know. It was a little bit cumbersome, for example, for Postman. It was good, but still you had to create an account and you had to deploy on the cloud to get the mock API. And also cloud was completely out of the question where I was working at that time, because it was also a regulated industry and things like that, like banking. And maybe I also really wanted a side project, which is a blessing and a curse. And so I started working on this. With the goal of having a tool really easy to use, preferably desktop and open source. Even if at the beginning it wasn't open source, because I had the crazy idea of selling it. And very, very quickly I open sourced it, because after realizing that I use so many libraries, tools, applications that are open source, I wanted to give something back to the community. I mean, it was obvious at that time that I would benefit from open sourcing it. So it has now, I mean, it got great success. It was slow at the beginning, and today it's beyond my expectation. It has something like 5,000 active users per month, 5,000 downloads per month, or nearly 6,000 sometimes. And I recently realized that it has been downloaded 100,000 times. So for me, it's like a small dream come true. I couldn't have expected something like that. So it's working quite well. The application is completely free. So there is a website, as you can see, with the documentation. Some bragging about the features. An official repository where you can open issues, where you can also check for the roadmap. I can send all the links also after the demo. So it's quite active, and I really try to create a community here and try to get as much feedback as I can from the user. And for example, Alexei, who is part of Webzurich, gave me some time for an interview, which I really appreciate. So it's really for me a very rewarding project. So now I will cut this and start doing the actual demo. So as I said, the most obvious case for using the application is mocking an API that doesn't exist. For example, I had also during the interviews cases of companies that have clients API that they don't have access to, that they cannot access it. So what they do, for example, is that they import open API files, and then they can get the client's API definitions, and they even deploy Mokun on their own infrastructure, which you will see is a little bit clunky for now. I mean, it has not been designed for that, but I mean, there are things on the roadmap that will fill this need. So there are many features. It's growing. I mean, the features list is growing. It's really hard to not over-clutter the application. I don't want it to be the next Jira where you can do everything, even if I like sometimes Jira. But my goal is always to keep the application really simple and really straightforward. The main goal at the beginning was to be able to create an API, a mock API, very quickly in 30 seconds, in 5 clicks maximum, and without creating an account, without deploying on the cloud, and this is working. So the idea behind the tool also is sometimes to refuse features that seems great, but that will completely maybe confuse the user or go beyond what the tool should do. And for example, if you ask me for complex business rule of something, that would add 7 tabs and make the thing completely complicated. I mean, I will probably answer, go and code this API for once, because if you have to work in a mocking tool for hours to replicate something, maybe you should code it. I mean, that's my philosophy. And sometimes I'm wrong and I need to implement that feature. But so I want to show you the major features and the most interesting one. So the first one is or maybe I will give you a small tour of the interface first. That will be better probably. So there is a collapsible menu on the left. It's basically what I called environments. So it's each API you can declare, with each of them as a separated port, of course. And it's served on all the local interface. So localhost 127.0.0.1, your local IP address, etc. Here you have the root list. So you can create as many as you want. Here at the top, it's the part that is dedicated to the environment. So you can have a prefix, a global prefix for your environment. You can also define a global latency. For example, if you want to simulate slow servers, you can also define a root specific latency if you have one root which is slower. This part is the one for the defining routes, responses and rules. You will see that. And there are some settings here that I will show you later. 2 big features that are hidden there, and I know they are hidden. I mean, these has come out of the interviews. I need to make them more obvious. So the first use case is that you can generate fake data and realistic data by using handlebars templating system together with faker.js helpers. So this is a library that is used to generate random everything, random numbers, first name, last name, addresses, latitude, longitude, whatever you want. And I also created a bunch of helpers specific to Mokun that allows you to access the content of the entering request. So for example, here you can access the query param that is named total. You can also access part of the body, or you can access query params is the one, but some URL param, for example. So it's really flexible. So I can give you here immediately an example of this call. Here you can see that I received JSON with 4 user generated. And I can, for example, request 800. It will probably be a little bit slow, but it will work. So it's really, really useful to simulate real life cases with a lot of data, with, I don't know, pagination and huge content. You can generate also whatever you want with this, because it's not tied to the JSON. You can also generate CSV, text, HTML, XML. And for example, here I generate on the CSV route 50 cities with latitude, longitude, and everything. So you can really generate any type of content you want. And also something interesting about this templating system is that it's available also in the file path, because you can serve a file or you can serve a body directly editable here. And you can also use this templating system in the headers. So you can, for example, say send a header with the accepted content type. And here you could put a helper to fetch the header accepted content type. And here, for example, I can show you an example. Depending here on the URL param named page name, I can serve different HTML files. So for example, you see here that I have a uuid.html file, which use templating inside the file to generate random UUIDs. And if I call this endpoint here, I can generate UUID. So the file is named HTML. I didn't put any HTML in the file. So obviously it's not the best demo I did, but you have an idea of what you can do with this. And yeah, multiple file generation, multiple type of file, or switching the extension depending on headers. So there are really a lot of possibilities. Also, another thing that I wanted to show you in the interface is that you have control on everything. You can use any method you want, any path you want. You can set headers for the route that are specific, but you also have environment headers that are global to one environment and apply to all the route. And they are overridden by the one you can define in a specific route. So it's really flexible. And one thing also that has been added more recently is the possibility to add multiple responses for each route. So for example, here in this route name rules/param1, you have one 200 and one 404. And so it's quite straightforward. I just changed the status code and also the content. And you can, for example, drag and drop here to define the one that will be served. So the drag and drop is not the best thing I came up with, but it will be changed soon with a checkbox, which is easier to manipulate and more obvious. But here, that's not really the topic. What I wanted to show you is that you have a rules system, which is quite simple and basic, but still interesting. For example, here, I defined one rule on each route. Here on the 200 route, the rule says that if the param1 equals XYZ, then this route will be served. And if it's something different, then you will get a 404. And I can immediately show you that it works because I checked before. So if I send test, for example, I will get the 404, content not found. And if I send XYZ, I will get content XYZ. So the rule system is quite simple. It will check each route one by one. And as soon as a rule match, it will serve this response, this specific response, and it will stop checking all the other routes. So of course, if you have one rule that catches everything at the beginning, you will get always the first response. But like this, you can, for example, define in the body multiple user and serve them depending on the parameter, the user ID, or whatever you put in root params or query params, for example. And routes can also, you can have multiple rules, and you can also say that they will be interpreted as or and, which is a very, very recent addition. Okay, so that's all for the rules. That's one detail. Mokun is based on Express.js because Electron, it's also built with Electron, which embark Node.js. So when creating the server, I use Express.js, which was for me the most obvious choice. It's one of the oldest library out there. It's very stable, and you can do a lot of things with it. So it supports some basic patterns. For example, here you can have the S or not, and you can add whatever you want at the end. So for example, here I can show you patterns with the S, anything else, and if I remove the S, I still get the same answer. So this is also quite flexible and interesting. And then two other features I'm quite proud of is that you have some kind of recording. I mean, all the entering requests and outgoing response are recorded. For now, it's only the last 50, so it's a little bit limited, but not that much. But it will also evolve in the future. But for example, you see exactly what entered in Mokun, with which method, if it was called by a root or not, and the params, the body, and you can see exactly what Mokun answered. And you can also see the body in an editor. And here, one interesting option is that you can mock the root. For example, everything has been coded here because obviously I was only testing things that how can I say that existed. But if I try to call something that doesn't exist, here we'll get a 404. I will see here that it wasn't coded, so there is no green tick, but I can mock it and I will get a root. I will get a new root. By default, it gets a 404 because it was answered with a 404. So maybe this needs to be changed one day, but for now it does the job, and you get also the entering headers, and you can then call the endpoint, and normally it exists. And it's already a beginning. Then you can customize the body, and you can like that, for example, intercept 10 queries and mock them quickly. And another features that I really like, no, sorry, I need to switch to another environment. It's the fact that you can partially mock APIs. So there is a feature that I call proxy mode, which is in the settings of the environment. And here you can define an endpoint, a URL, where you will forward all the calls that are not called by the route that you declare here. So Mokun will go through every route, or all of the routes, and if it's not called by any of them, it will be forwarded here. You can even add some headers that will be append to the call made to this API, and headers that will be added to the response from this API. So it's a little bit more concrete in your mind if I show you how it works. So here I will forward to the Star Wars API, and I added an endpoint that doesn't exist on their API. Basically, you can fetch people from ID number 0 or 1 to, I don't know, maybe 100, something like that. But there is no people number, there is no person number 1000. So for example, if I call here number 50, I will get someone from the Star Wars API. But I want to add one more because the endpoint doesn't exist yet in their API, but I still want to benefit from their work. So I will forward to them, but still I intercept. And I added myself as the number 1000. So this is already also very interesting if you are mocking only partially an API. And for example, at work, I forward to the real API, but I'm mocking the authorization endpoint because locally it's harder to get a token. And so this really easier the development. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to show you. So there is also an import-export system. You can export and import in Mokun proprietary format through files, but also through copy to clipboard. So you can copy to clipboard, create a new file, and paste the data. It's JSON data, and you can easily share it with coworkers. And they can just then, for example, import from clipboard, and they get exactly what you declared in your Mokun instance. And that's also, there is no, for example, no team sharing, for example, at this moment. But I know during interviews that a lot of people found workarounds and basically share the export through Git repositories, which is working quite well. So for now, it's not completely automated, and but I mean, it does the job. So that would be one way to do it. Also, you can here see the app data folder. And by going here in storage, you can see the storage files from Mokun, and you can easily, for example, set that to be a Git repository. And on the roadmap, I want to talk also about the roadmap, because this is a very interesting point, is that soon you will be able to define, for example, different data file for different APIs. So you will be, for example, able to say that slash user slash something is the folder of first API data folder or data file, and then it can be a Git repository maybe more easily than it is right now. So that's also on the roadmap. And the biggest thing on the roadmap is the CLI. So for now, I said at the beginning that Mokun has been deployed in infrastructure before by some folks, and it's working, but still it's quite heavy because it embarks Node.js and Chrome. I mean, it's Electron. So Mokun is not that heavy, but still it's not the lightest CLI you can find. It's not even a CLI. So that's the focus of my work right now, to provide a small CLI that you can easily install with the NPM, and for example, integrate in your CI workflow. So for example, you can easily run integration test against a mocked API with Mokun. That will be great, and it's coming. I cannot say soon because it's a side project, so I still need to sleep. But I hope maybe for January or something like that. And I think it would be a huge and great addition. Anyway, it's one of the most requested feature. So yes, that's the main roadmap, and also maybe some different type of endpoints, because for now everything is separated, get, post, put, for example, and there is no relation between them. For example, if you put something, it's not saved anywhere. For now, it's a little bit static. So the idea would be to create one endpoint that would be called CRUD, for example, and where you can, if you put, it will store in JSON the entities you put in it, and you can also delete, post, and it acts like a real CRUD endpoint. So I think that will be also perfect for, I mean, quick mocking and yeah, quick and easy mocking. So I've covered the main things I wanted to talk about. It's already 20 minutes and maybe more. Yeah, so I can also share some links at the end of the presentation, so that that's the official website. You won't have a hard time to find it. I showed you the official repository with the roadmap. There are also the documentation on the official website, and the most interesting one is the templating, because you can do a lot with it. But there is also a documentation about the routing, the proxy mode, and the logging. And it's always interesting because, I mean, some features are not that obvious, so it can help too. I've exported the data I use for this demo in a GIST, so I can share this too. If some people are interested. And if you have questions, I'm here, and I'm really happy to help. If I can find my page. No, apparently not. Okay, that's the GIST page. No, GitHub profile. So you see my screen name is 255 kilobytes. Don't ask me why. And you can find me everywhere on Twitter, and I will be more than happy to help you. Or if you are using Mokun, if you want to interview and give a little bit of time, you are also welcome. And if you want to sponsor my work, you can sponsor it too on GitHub.
Awesome.
And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That has been fantastic, Norris. Thanks so much, Guillaume. I think the tool is really, really cool, and I finally have a better way of doing API mocking than basically just building myself a small Express.js application. So
I hope
that's pretty cool. Also, I think if I remember correctly, no, actually I don't remember. I know for sure 1st of October, so that's next week, Wednesday, Hacktoberfest starts. If you haven't heard about Hacktoberfest, Google it, hacktoberfest.com. It's an initiative where you can help open source projects like this one, for instance, by basically making some stuff happen in these open source projects. And if you do that, then you can get a t-shirt and stickers and cool stuff. So if you want to get started with open source, I'm sure Guillaume is very happy to help you getting started, which would be kind of
cool.
Great. Yeah.
I need to prepare the issues still.
Yeah, well, it's not 1st of October yet, so that's an opportunity. Will you join the after party chat as well?
Yeah, I will try a little bit. Yeah.
In that case, if there's questions, you can also ask there, or use the chat here for everyone. Hi, everyone who just joined or joined throughout the talk. Feel free to use the chat box over there to talk with us. Let's say hi. It's kind of fun to talk to others. Thanks so much, Guillaume. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Right, now, next up is Mike, who's jumping in for McKenna. I'm super bad with names, but basically we get the same talk about testing GraphQL as was planned, which I think is super, super cool. Mike has volunteered himself to jump in tonight. Hi, Mike. How's it going?
Good. Hello. I'm super happy to jump in and actually meet your community for the first time. The circumstances maybe aren't ideal, but the second time I could maybe come to Zurich and listen to a talk and have a nice local beverage with everybody there.
That would be lovely. Where are you based, actually?
In Finland.
Oh, okay. So at least like same times. I think it's same time zone. Is it same time zone, or is it like 1 hour off?
One ahead, and the backstory is that my colleague who was going to give the presentation lived in Zurich and was in this community, so I'm helping her out with that. But it gives me I've never been to Zurich before, actually, so it gives me an incentive to go and meet.
Definitely. If you're ever making it over to Zurich and things are safe again, let us know, and we're happy to host you. That would be fantastic.
That'd be great.
But I think now, without further ado, people are probably like super jiggly for your talk, so let's get going with that. Just quick question at the chat. Anyone in the chat using GraphQL? I know that we're using GraphQL for the Webzurich website, for instance. Anyone else? Any GraphQL users here? Like, give us a show of hands, kind of. That'd be fun. Also, again, I see that we have 18 people in the stream. I'm pretty sure not everyone has said hi in the chat, so feel free to say hi in the chat. And once we get the slides up and running, we will commence the second talk of today.
Yeah, let me turn the video off because I'm going to be streaming from my computer. Is it okay if I do a share screen right now?
Sure. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Let me just make sure that I have the GraphQL playground up. It's always this demo effect thing. So
I've been there, Mike. I've been there so many times. I've done talks at Webzurich myself, and I had this like situation like it worked 5 minutes ago. I swear to God, it used to work just 5 minutes ago. So that's something that people are used to, thanks to me.
Good. You prepared the terrain well for me, but hopefully this is sharing. It looks like it is.
This
sharing. Is my Ubuntu box back at home. So I'd like to show you what I'm going to present to you today. I'm sure that it's not as elegant as the front end you talked about, but this is the demo project that my company maintains called the Mishkin Bank. And it uses GraphQL and OpenAPI. But today I'm just going to talk about the GraphQL and how to test it. So I'm going to look at 2 ways to test GraphQL. And for those of you who are not using it, it'll hopefully be a nice little intro as well. But maybe my the overarching thing I'd like you to remember from this talk at the end, we'll see it kind of time and time again, is as technology gets slick and wants you to forget more and more things, it's harder and harder to remember how to test. So it used to be that like GraphQL, you would use Express. Now you no longer use Express. Now you can use it in Next.js, and all of these things make it easier and easier to use. but the testing situation hasn't really evolved that well with it. So it makes it harder and harder to test. And then as a result, people don't write tests. It doesn't need to be that way. So what I'm going to do is give you tips on how to do that. And then all this is open source, so you can check it out as well. So the Mishkin Bank is, you could sign on as a root, sign on as a user, transfer money, all the sorts of stuff you can do with the bank, and authenticate as a root. If you want to be the owner of the bank, then you put in the password. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're just going to try out the bank, and I'm going to show you kind of the first way to test GraphQL. So remember, I said this is split up in two parts. One kind of the first part, I didn't say this yet, is interactive, and the second part is programmatic. So now I'd like to start the first part. So if you're following along at home, you can just check out github.com/mishkin/bank, which I have open right here. So I'll go back to that same README that you have, and what I would like to do is npm run dev, and this is kind of where the demo effect would normally explode, but it hasn't yet. So it's running the way that it ran 5 minutes ago before I did this. So good sign there. So now what I'm going to do is go to the endpoint. I'm going to go to this endpoint actually, so you can see the Mishkin Bank. So this is our UI. No hidden fees, save money, view your spendings, invest your earnings. By the way, I'm the founder and CEO of this company called Mishkin. We do testing. But we've said that if that ever goes south during this weird economic time, then we can always just use the Mishkin Bank in production. But for now, it's our demo app. So this is what it looks like. If you're building a web app, maybe certain things look familiar, like whatever. So it's built using Next.js. And the way that Next.js works, at least in the most recent iterations, is you can have an API under a folder called the API. So that's where GraphQL API is. So the way Next.js mirrors the file hierarchy. So if something is an API GraphQL, then it will be /API/GraphQL in Next.js. So to show you that I'm not lying to you, let's do /API/GraphQL. And here you have something called GraphQL Playground. So this is the first bit about how to test GraphQL. In here, there's a schema that shows my whole entire Mishkin Bank schema. And in here, this is like full-blown documentation for the Mishkin Bank. So you'd think that I'm like a very responsible coder with all this beautiful stuff in here. But actually, I'm a very lazy coder, and all of this stuff happens out of the box. So the first thing I would like to show you is just how to like leverage your laziness to your advantage by just putting in the 1 or 2 lines of code that you need to make it look like this, and then I'll show you how that relates to testing. So when you're building using Apollo, in this case it's using Apollo, a schema is the thing that drives your server. So this has all the business logic. That's kind of the boring part. I'm not going to get into how the Mishkin Bank works yet. We'll get into that when we talk about writing the test. But the important part is not the business logic. It's these 2 little things. Introspection is true and playground is true. If you just add these 2 settings, like literally just these 2 settings, then you get this playground for free in a browser. And this allows you to test out your GraphQL API. So let me show you how that works. So here, it has autocomplete. I'm going to sound like I'm a salesman for a GraphQL Playground, but it's not the case. I didn't build this thing. It's just I use stuff like this all the time. So it shows all the queries. So for example, I could send query root, and it will say I'm not signed in as root. I could also look at the documentation and see that there's a query root that should return a Boolean. There's a mutation authenticate as root. So let's do that. I'm testing out to see if my GraphQL works. So authenticate as root. Authenticate as root. If I click on it, we see it takes an argument password. Let's look at the README. So the README says the password is password with $signs and a 0. But let's assume that I am testing it and I put in just a regular old O and I press play. Then it throws an error saying incorrect password. So I've just kind of done my first test. I'm testing around and it has the wrong password, and Apollo says incorrect. So I could go back to the documentation, see what's going on, and I realize me, the tester, I was wrong. This is my super secure password to control all of the money in my bank. And I click on it, and then it says now I'm authenticated as root. And then if you go back to the schema, you could think of it like you're poking around or the documentation. Okay, so authenticate as root. So let's like check out all the clients, for example. So now we can look at clients in the bank, and I can get the name and the email of each client. And when I run it, it says you can only fetch users as root. So that means that the authentication here is broken, because you remember I authenticated as root. So here in my test, and this is a test, this is something that's purposefully broken in the Michigan Bank. So backing up again, I said that we're a testing company. So we actually keep our demo repo in a broken state, specifically to show how our testing tool finds these errors. That might sound a little like weird, but when you're a testing company, that's how you roll. So we're logged in as root, but we can't find clients. So that's a bug. But here, if I'm doing like exploratory testing with my GraphQL playground, then I would see that as a bug, and then I'd go back into the code and fix it. So we haven't gotten into automated testing yet. We've just gone into exploratory testing. But for those of you that build web APIs, you're usually consuming APIs. You're not producing them. But let's say that you're building a web app, and the web app uses a GraphQL API. And for an example of what that could look like, you could see that. Let's see in here, like, so these pages, for example, clients index. So here the client is sending a query. So this query right here that I'm sending from my client, I can copy and paste it into this, and it should work exactly the same. So it says unauthenticated as client, but it didn't complain about a parsing error. Whereas if I had like done this and deleted a curly bracket, it would not even be able to parse it. It's actually freezing up and getting mad at me. It doesn't even run the query. This allows us to like take the queries right from our web app, copy and paste them into the browser, and test them out. It's a pretty manual type of testing. I personally, as a developer, hate doing this sort of exploratory manual testing because it feels like kind of grunt work. But it's super useful to make sure that like when you're writing an app for the first time, that it behaves as expected. And as you saw, getting one of these up and running is as easy as adding 2 environment variables in or 2 Boolean flags in an Apollo project. So that's the first bit that I wanted to talk about testing, and that's the minor bit. The major bit, which fits quite well with what Guillaume was talking about in terms of like mocking data. Here we're not really mocking, but you could definitely hook up something like Makun to drive something like this. But it has to do with automated testing of GraphQL APIs, and that's maybe the more interesting bit. So whether you're consuming or producing GraphQL APIs, at a certain point, you'll want to work with them in your tests in a CI/CD pipeline. And there, you're not going to pay some poor individual to interact with a web UI in your CI/CD pipeline. That would be cruel. If like there was somebody that did that on every commit and then added a check mark to your Git branch. So like you want it to be automatic, and you would like software to do it, of course. So that's the next thing I'm going to talk about, is how to make GraphQL testing automatic. So some of these concepts are going to be foreign if you're not from the JavaScript world. If you are, they might be a little bit more familiar. But what I'll try to do is talk about the general principle and the specific in JavaScript. And then if you have any questions about how to do this in Phoenix, I myself work mostly in PureScript and Haskell. So if you want to know how to do this in Haskell or PureScript, like let me know. But for now, I'm going to be doing it in JavaScript. So I'm going to use a framework called Jest. So getting out of here, in order to install Jest, npm install save dev great. We are going to install Jest. It's already installed, but this is going to be our test runner. And I'm just going to run 2 tests. So I've written them already, but we're going to do a little live coding as well. I have a test that says addition worked, where I expect 1-to-1 to be 2, and then GraphQL worked. So, but who likes passing tests, right? Let's make it fail first. So npm test. So we're going to run that test, and this one I didn't change, will pass, but the one on top will fail. Why did it fail? Because we expected 1-to-1 to be 3, and actually it was 2. But then we could kind of reevaluate and say, okay, actually 1 + 1 should in fact be 2. Last time I checked, and I run it again, and all is good. So that's how the Jest testing framework works. You can put as many tests as you want. So like I said, I've never been to Zurich, but I could sure write a test about it. So I could put test. The Zurich web community is nice, and I could put this as my test, and then expect, it has this autocomplete thing that is, expect Zurich to be in Switzerland. I don't know if I spelled Switzerland right, but this is the part of the conversation where I say I'm actually American, so I could make silly mistakes like that, and it's okay. So then if I run it, npm test, and now it's going to also run my Zurich test, which also passes. But if I said that it is in France, then it should complain, and rightly so, because it is not, and as far as I know, in terms of history, never has been. So there you go. So that's kind of how to do a basic test in Jest. But you're not here for that. You're here for testing GraphQL. That said, I just want to get that out of the way. So what I want to pitch to you about how to test GraphQL, there's two little bits in JavaScript land that you need to know in order to be able to do it, and both of them are pretty obfuscated. So this is kind of where take notes. It's also open source, but just write down that this is what to do. So the first thing is that you'll have some sort of schema and you'll have some sort of resolvers if you're building with Apollo. And in your actual production code in GraphQL, you're going to write import from Apollo server, and then you're going to create an Apollo server here. However, you're going to create a different Apollo server for your test. So if you just import this, your test will explode and it will work. Instead, you're going to use a package. Sorry, I sound very declarative. You're going to, but just I highly recommend you to use a package instead called Apollo Server Express. So here, I'm taking from Apollo Server Micro, and here I'm taking the same thing from Apollo Server Express. So otherwise, it's the same deal. I'm going to create an Apollo server with type depths and resolvers. Here, I created it with the schema. If I click through has type depths and resolvers. So the basic setup is exactly the same. However, the library I import Apollo server from is different, and that makes all the difference. So if you import it from here, then it can be hooked up to Express, which is a Node.js REST API library. And by hooking it up to Express, and where I'm going to do that is server.apply middleware app, where app is Express. Then from there, I could use this package called supertest. And this is the super mega important thing, is that supertest is what's going to exercise your test very much like in the way that Guillaume was talking about. So let's scroll down to see how that works. So now I'm going to say request supertest app. Remember, app up here is where we preloaded our GraphQL API. And I'm going to post to the GraphQL endpoint. I'm going to send the exact same mutation we saw before with password, with 0 like this. I'll set it to accept application.json. And then I'm going to expect that it's going to be 200, and I'm going to expect the GraphQL return to be true. So we'll run it again just to show that it's true and that all works. But now let's make it fail. And what I'm going to do is make it fail the exact same way that I made it fail in the UI. So if you remember, I had made it, instead of a 0, I had made an O. So theoretically, it should fail the same way. Otherwise, kind of we're in deep trouble. And in fact, it does. So it says cannot read property authenticate as root of null, which is exactly what we wanted, meaning that it doesn't even return that because we had an incorrect password. So now if we change it to the correct password, it should work just fine. So we got the bug doesn't look the same because it's provoking the CLI instead of a web UI, but nonetheless, the bug is exposed, which is what we wanted. So a couple of other little weird bits of this, and this gets under the hood in GraphQL in ways that some people might not know, that GraphQL, all it is, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, is a post request to an endpoint with 3 fields. Here, I only used one of them. The other 2 are optional, and it's called query. And inside your query, you put whatever you want. So in here, I put a mutation. I could also put query me, for example, me, that's the query that we saw before. But here I put that authentication mutation. So you can't, this is a mistake I see all the time, and it's a totally understandable one. I see people say, okay, I'm going to send my GraphQL like this. So I'll send a string. Because when you're sending GraphQL, it feels like you're sending a string, but actually you're not. Under the hood, all GraphQL libraries wrap the GraphQL string in a JSON object with query in front of it. That's just what the spec is for GraphQL. So that's a little bit of extra manual work you need to do, but it's just creating a JavaScript object. And then the other bit that might seem a little bit weird is when you get a response back from GraphQL, it's JSON, so that much you know if you're working with GraphQL, but it's wrapped in this thing called data. So it will either have data or error. So data dot authenticate as root as opposed to just authenticate as root. So that's most GraphQL libraries kind of shave off the data part because it's one extra layer, right? You need an object called data. You can just scroll down. But here, true, we're expecting true, we got undefined because all it has in there is data and errors if there are errors, but there are none. So there you go. So in order to use programmatic tests from Jest, by the way, one thing I should say, just to point it out, is that this didn't run a long time at all. It's like as fast as a Jest test. So what we're doing is we're spinning up a mini version of the server in every test. So we usually think of booting up servers as like a super heavy thing. But now, if I write 2 tests, I'm going to boot up 2 servers on off, and it was that fast. Like it cannot read properly authenticated root is null. So the data is null. So actually, we expect it to fail. So we're going to expect the data to be null because we have the wrong password, and now the test should run. So here, I'm booting up 2 servers, and it happened in 1.522 seconds. So basically, in your unit test, you can boot up like hundreds of GraphQL servers, and it'll take like a few seconds to run. So it's not it's a really lightweight thing, and all you have to do is remember these little syntax warts. Like you have to wrap it in query, you have to do one extra level deep called data, but then you could do all the expectations you want exactly as if you're writing with Cucumber or Jest or JUnit or whatever. So the way I'm trying to demystify GraphQL is all GraphQL is a post request to an API with a JSON object that says query. And if you test it just like you tested your own REST API, then you can use the same exact tools. You don't need anything fancy or above and beyond that. But as I said in the beginning of my presentation, a lot of times the tools kind of move us away. But because the tools simplify life, they move us away from the testability of the thing, and that is what I'm showing you now how to do. So as I mentioned, it's open source, it's online. I made a PR, so it's not merged into the branch yet. It's in this branch called Zurich for the time being, but it's in the Mishkin Bank. So feel free to copy and paste the code, test your GraphQL APIs. And if you have any questions about how to do it, just please let me know. And that's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. That has been fun and interesting. And I'm always mind blown how much more there is to GraphQL than I grasp every now and then, because I'm like, yeah, how do I actually test GraphQL? So that was really, really cool. Will you join the after party chat as well if people have questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I can make it for about 5-ish, 10 minutes afterwards.
All right. Yeah, no worries.
Just have a kid to put to sleep, so I
no worries. No, don't apologize for doing the right thing. Like that's not necessary. You're doing the right thing. That's amazing. And yeah, I'm super grateful that you could jump in basically last minute and make this happen and bring this talk to our community. And I hope that it was useful to everyone as much as it was useful to me. And I hope that you enjoyed it. Also, thanks to Guillaume and thanks to everyone who's watching. It's always great to make this happen and to see people come together. And we've seen a little bit of chit chat in the chat rooms. I hope that we see continuous chat in Slack as well after this meetup. As I said, the next meetup will also be virtual. Will happen here on the YouTube channel on the 30th of October. It's going to be like a spooky-tober meetup where we will share some death horror stories. I'll share one of mine, and we hope to get more people on board with sharing their horror stories as well. And it's going to be fun. Also, as I said, we do have an after-party chat. I mentioned that with both speakers. If you want to join, get your microphone in, and if you want to, your camera ready, and jump into webzh.dev/afterparty. I'll join for a couple of minutes as well. And yeah, keep the chit chat alive. I hope to see you all next month, and hope to see you eventually back in person as well. And also, Mike, if you want to come to Zurich for the real world meetup in the future, you'll be very much welcome to do so. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Have a fantastic evening. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to see you again soon. Bye. Or actually see you in a moment in the after party chat. Good. All right. Bye-bye.